Chapter 5.8 How with much ado we got a sight of the Popock. Our junketing and banqueting held on at the same rate the third day as the two former. Pantagruel then earnestly desired to see the Popock, but Oedipus told him it was not such an easy matter to get a sight of him. How, asked Pantagruel, has he Plato's helmet on his crown, Gyges' ring on his pounces, or a chameleon on his breast, to make him invisible when he pleases? No, sir, returned Oedipus, but he is naturally of pretty difficult access. However, I'll see and take care that you may see him, if possible. With this he left us piddling, then within a quarter of an hour came back, and told us the Popock is now to be seen. So he led us, without the least noise, directly to the cage, wherein he sat drooping, with his feathers staring about him, attended by a brace of little cardin hawks and 6 lusty fusty bish-hawks. Panurge stared at him like a dead pig, examining exactly his figure, size, and motions. Then with a loud voice he said, a curse light on the hatcher of the ill bird, "Oh my word, this is a filthy whoop-hooper." "Tush, speak softly," said Oedipus. "By G, he has a pair of ears, as formerly Michael de Matascones remarked." "What then?" returned Panurge, "so hath a whoop-cat." "So," said Oedipus, "if he but hear you speak such another blasphemous word, you had as good be damned. Do you see that basin yonder in his cage? Out of it shall sally thunderbolts and lightnings, storms, bulls, and the devil and all. That will sink you down to peg trantums, and 100 fathom underground. It were better to drink and be merry," quoth Friar John. Panurge was still feeding his eyes with the sight of the Popock and his attendants, when somewhere under his cage he perceived a madge-howlet. With this he cried out, "By the devil's maker, master, there's roguery in the case. They put tricks upon travellers here more than anywhere else, and would make us believe that a TD's a sugar loaf. What damned cozening, gulling, and coney-catching have we here? Do you see this madge-howlet? By Minerva, we are all beshit." "Odsoons," said Oedipus, "speak softly, tell you. It is no madge-howlet, no she thing on my honest word, but a male and a noble bird." "May we not hear the Popock sing?" asked Pantagruel. "I dare not promise that," returned Oedipus, "for he only sings and eats at his own hours." "So don't I," quoth Panurge. "Poor Pilgarlic is fain to make everybody's time his own. If they have time, I find time. Come then, let us go drink if you will." "Now this is something like a tansy," said Oedipus. "You begin to talk somewhat like, still speak in that fashion, and I'll secure you from being thought a heretic. Come on, I am of your mind." As we went back to have t'other fuddling bout, we spied an old green-headed bish-hawk, who sat moping with his mate and 3 jolly bittern attendants, all snoring under an arbor. Near the old cuff stood a buxom abbescite that sung like any linnet, and we were so mightily tickled with her singing that I vow and swear we could have wished all our members but one turned into ears, to have had more of the melody. Quoth Panurge, "This pretty cherubim of cherubims is here breaking her head with chanting to this huge, fat, ugly face, who lies grunting all the while like a hog as he is. I will make him change his note presently, in the devil's name." With this he rang a bell that hung over the bish-hawk's head, but though he rang and rang again, the devil a bit bish-hawk would hear. The louder the sound, the louder his snoring. There was no making him sing. "By G," quoth Panurge, "you old buzzard, if you won't sing by fair means, you shall by foul." Having said this, he took up one of St. Stephen's loaves, alias a stone, and was going to hit him with it about the middle. But Oedipus cried to him, "Hold, hold, honest friend. Strike, wound, poison, kill, and murder all the kings and princes in the world, by treachery or how thou wilt, and as soon as thou wouldst unnestle the angels from their cockloft. Popock will pardon thee all this, but never be so mad as to meddle with these sacred birds, as much as thou lovest the profit, welfare, and life not only of thyself, and thy friends and relations alive or dead, but also of those that may be born hereafter to the 1000th generation, for so long thou wouldst entail misery upon them. Do but look upon that basin." "Catso." "Let us rather drink then," quoth Panurge. "He that spoke last, spoke well, Mr. Antitus," quoth Friar John. "While we are looking on these devilish birds, we do nothing but blaspheme, and while we are taking a cup, we do nothing but praise God. Come on then, let's go drink, How well that word sounds. The third day after we had drank, as you must understand, Editus dismissed us. We made him a present of a pretty little perguy knife, which he took more kindly than Artaxerxes did the cup of cold water that was given him by a clown. He most courteously thanked us, and sent all sorts of provisions aboard our ships, wished us a prosperous voyage and success in our undertakings, and made us promise and swear by Jupiter of stone to come back by his territories. Finally he said to us, "Friends, pray note that there are many more stones in the world than men. Take care you don't forget it." Chapter 5.9. How we arrived at the island of Tools. Having well ballasted the holds of our human vessels, we weighed anchor, hoised up sail, stowed the boats, set the land, and stood for the offing with a fair loom gale, and for more haste unperilled the mizzen-yard, and launched it and the sail over the lee quarter, and fitted gyves to keep it steady, and boomed it out. So in 3 days we made the island of Tools that is altogether uninhabited. We saw there a great number of trees which bore mattocks, pickaxes, crows, weeding hooks, scythes, sickles, spades, trowels, hatchets, hedging bills, saws, adzes, bills, axes, shears, pincers, bolts, piercers, augers, and wimbles. Others bore dags, daggers, poniards, bayonets, square-bladed tucks, stilettos, poniardos, scions, penknives, puncheons, bodkins, swords, rapiers, backswords, cutlasses, scimitars, hangers, falchions, glaives, railins, whittles, and whinyards. Whoever would have any of these needed but to shake the tree, and immediately they dropped down as thick as hops, like so many ripe plums, nay, what's more, they fell on a kind of grass called scabbard, and sheathed themselves in it cleverly. But when they came down, there was need of taking care lest they happen to touch the head, feet, or other parts of the body. For they fell with the point downwards, and in they stuck or slit the continuum of some member, or lopped it off like a twig, either of which generally was enough to have killed a man, though he were 100 years old, and worth as many thousand spankers, spur royals, and rose nobles. Under some other trees, whose names I cannot justly tell you, I saw some certain sorts of weeds that grew and sprouted like pikes, lances, javelins, javelots, darts, dartlets, halberds, boar spears, eel spears, partisans, tridents, prongs, trout staves, spears, half-pikes, and hunting staves. As they sprouted up and chanced to touch the tree, straight they met with their heads, points, and blades, each suitable to its kind, made ready for them by the trees over them, as soon as every individual wood was grown up, fit for its steel. Even like the children's coats, that are made for them as soon as they can wear them, and you wean them of their swaddling clothes. Nor do you mutter, I pray you, at what Plato, Anaxagoras, and Democritus have said. Odds fish! They were none of your lower-form gimcracks, were they? Those trees seem to us terrestrial animals, in no wise so different from brute beasts as not to have skin, fat, flesh, veins, arteries, ligaments, nerves, cartilages, kernels, bones, marrow, humors, matrices, brains, and articulations. For they certainly have some, since Theophrastus will have it so. But in this point they differed from other animals, that their heads, that is, the part of their trunks next to the root, are downwards, their hair, that is, their roots, in the earth, and their feet, that is, their branches, upside down, as if a man should stand on his head with outstretched legs. And as you, battered sinners on whom Venus has bestowed something to remember her, feel the approach of rains, winds cold, and every change of weather at your ischiatic legs and your omoplates, by means of the perpetual almanac which she has fixed there. So these trees have notice given them, by certain sensations which they have at their roots, stalks, gums, paps, or marrow, of the growth of the staves under them, and accordingly they prepare suitable points and blades for them beforehand. Yet as all things, except God, are sometimes subject to error, nature itself not free from it when it produceth monstrous things, likewise I observed something amiss in these trees. For a half-pike that grew up high enough to reach the branches of one of these instrumentiferous trees, happened no sooner to touch them, but instead of being joined to an iron head, it impaled a stubbed broom at the fundament. Well, no matter, 'twill serve to sweep the chimney. Thus a partisan met with a pair of garden shears. Come, all's good for something. 'Twill serve to nip off little twigs and destroy caterpillars. The staff of a halberd got the blade of a scythe, which made it look like a hermaphrodite. Happy be lucky, 'tis all a case, 'twill serve for some mower. Oh, 'tis a great blessing to put our trust in the Lord. As we went back to our ships, I spied behind I don't know what bush, I don't know what folks, doing I don't know what business, in I don't know what posture, scouring I don't know what tools, in I don't know what manner, and I don't know what place. Chapter 5.1. How Pantagruel arrived at the island of Sharping. We left the island of Tools to pursue our voyage, and the next day stood in for the island of Sharping, the true image of Fontainebleau. For the land is so very lean that the bones, that is, the rocks, shoot through its skin. Besides, 'tis sandy, barren, unhealthy, and unpleasant. Our pilot showed us there 2 little square rocks, which had 8 equal points in the shape of a cube. They were so white that I might have mistaken them for alabaster or snow, had he not assured us they were made of bone. He told us that 20 chance devils very much feared in our country dwelt there in 6 different stories, and that the biggest twins or braces of them were called sixes, and the smallest amsace. The rest sinks, quatters, treys, and deuces. When they were conjured up, otherwise coupled, they were called either sice sink, sice quatter, sice tray, sice deuce, and sice ace, or sink quatter, sink tray, and so forth. I made there a shrewd observation. Would you know what 'tis, gamesters? 'Tis that there are very few of you in the world, but what call upon and invoke the devils. For the dice are no sooner thrown on the board, and the greedy gazing sparks have hardly said, 2 sixes, Frank, but 6 devils, damn it. Cry as many of them. If amsace, then a brace of devils broil me. Will they say, quatterdeuce Tom, the deuce take it. Cries another. And so on to the end of the chapter. Nay, they don't forget sometimes to call the black cloven-footed gentlemen by their Christian names and surnames. And what is stranger yet, they use them as their greatest cronies, and make them so often the executors of their wills, not only giving themselves, but everybody and everything to the devil, that there's no doubt but he takes care to seize, soon or late, what so zealously bequeathed him. Indeed, 'tis true Lucifer does not always immediately appear by his lawful attorneys, but alas! 'Tis not for want of goodwill, he is really to be excused for his delay, for what the devil would you have a devil do? He and his blackguards are then at some other places, according to the priority of the persons that call on them. Therefore, pray let none be so venturesome as to think that the devils are deaf and blind. He then told us that more wrecks had happened about those square rocks, and a greater loss of body and goods, than about all the Seats, Scyllas and Charybdis, Sirens, Strophades, and Gulfs in the universe. I had not much ado to believe it, remembering that formerly, among the wise Egyptians, Neptune was described in hieroglyphics for the first cube, Apollo by an ace, Diana by a deuce, Minerva by 7, and so forth. He also told us that there was a phial of Saint-Grial, a most divine thing, and known to a few. Panurge did so sweeten up the syndics of the place that they blessed us with the sight of tea. But it was with 3 times more pother and ado, with more formalities and antic tricks, than they show the Pandects of Justinian at Florence or the Holy Veronica at Rome. I never saw such a sight of flambeaux, torches, and hagios, sanctified tapers, rushlights, and farthing candles in my whole life. After all, that which was shown, us was only the ill-faced countenance of a roasted coney. All that we saw there worth speaking of was a good face set upon an ill game, and the shells of the 2 eggs formerly laid up and hatched by Leda, out of which came Castor and Pollux, fair Helen's brothers. These same syndics sold us a piece of for a song, for a morsel of bread. Before we went we bought a parcel of hats and caps of the manufacture of the place, which, I fear, will turn to no very good account. Nor are those who shall take off our hands more likely to commend their wearing. Chapter 5.11. How we passed through the wicket inhabited by Gripe Menol, Archduke of the Furred Locats. From thence condemnation was passed by us. 'Tis another damned barren island, whereat none for the world cared to touch. Then we went through the wicket, but Pantagruel had no mind to bear us company, and 'twas well he did not. For we were nabbed there, and clapped into Lob's Pound by order of Gripe Menol, Archduke of the Furred Locats, because one of our company would put upon a sergeant some hats of the Sharping Island. The Furred Locats are most terrible and dreadful monsters. They devour little children, and trample over marble stones. Pray tell me, noble topers, do they not deserve to have their snouts slit? The hair of their hides doesn't lie outward, but inwards, and every mother's son of M for his device wears a gaping pouch, but not all in the same manner. For some wear it tied to their neck scarf-wise, others upon the breech, some on the paunch, others on the side, and all for a cause, with reason and mystery. They have claws so very strong, long, and sharp that nothing can get from M that is once fast between their clutches. Sometimes they cover their heads with mortar-like caps, at other times with mortified caparisons. As we entered their den, said a common mumper, to whom we had given half a testin, worshipful culprits, God send you a good deliverance. Examine well, said he, the countenance of these stout props and pillars of this catch-coin law and iniquity, and pray observe that if you still live but 6 Olympiads, and the age of 2 dogs more, you'll see these furred lawcats lords of all Europe, and in peaceful possession of all the estates and dominions belonging to it. Unless, by divine providence, what's got over the devil's back is spent under his belly, or the goods which they unjustly get perish with their prodigal heirs. Take this from an honest beggar. Among M reigns the 6th essence, by the means of which they gripe all, devour all, conskite all, burn all, draw all, hang all, quarter all, behead all, murder all, imprison all, waste all, and ruin all, without the least notice of right or wrong. For among them vice is called virtue, wickedness, piety, treason, loyalty, robbery, justice. Plunder is their motto, and when acted by them is approved by all men, except the heretics, and all this they do because they dare. Their authority is sovereign and irrefragable. For a sign of the truth of what I tell you, you'll find that there the mangers are above the racks. Remember hereafter that a fool told you this, and if ever plague, famine, war, fire, earthquakes, inundations, or other judgments befall the world, do not attribute M to the aspects and conjunctions of the malevolent planets, to the abuses of the court of Romania, or the tyranny of secular kings and princes, to the impostures of the false zealots of the cowl, heretical bigots, false prophets, and broachers of sex, to the villainy of griping usurers, clippers, and coiners, or to the ignorance, impudence, and imprudence of physicians, surgeons, and apothecaries, nor to the lewdness of adulteresses and destroyers of byeblows, but charge them all, wholly and solely, to the inexpressible, incredible, and inestimable wickedness and ruin which is continually hatched, brewed, and practiced in the den or shop of those furred lawcats. Yet 'tis no more known in the world than the Kabbalah of the Jews, the more's the pity, and therefore 'tis not detested, chastised, and punished as 'tis fit it should be. But should all their villainy be once displayed in its true colors, and exposed to the people, there never was, is, nor will be any spokesman so sweet-mouthed, whose fine colloguing tongue could save M, nor any law so rigorous and draconic that could punish M as they deserve, nor yet any magistrate so powerful as to hinder their being burnt alive in their caniberos without mercy. Even their own furred kittlings, friends, and relations would abominate M. For this reason, as Hannibal was solemnly sworn by his father Amilcar to pursue the Romans with the utmost hatred as long as ever he lived, so my late father has enjoined me to remain here without, till God Almighty's thunder reduce them there within to ashes, like other presumptuous titans, profane wretches, and opposers of God, since mankind is so inured to their oppressions that they either do not remember, foresee, or have a sense of the woes and miseries which they have caused. Or if they have, either will not, dare not, or cannot root M out. How, said Panurge, say you so? Catch me there and hang me. Damn, let's march off. This noble beggar has scared me worse than thunder in autumn, Monteux gives, than the thunder would do them. Upon this we were filing off, but alas, we found ourselves trapped. The door was double-locked and barricadoed. Some messengers of ill news told us it was full as easy to get in there as into hell, and no less hard to get out. There indeed lay the difficulty, for there is no getting loose without a pass and discharge in due course from the bench. This for no other reason than because folks go easier out of a church than out of a sponging house, and because they could not have our company when they would. The worst on't was when we got through the wicket, for we were carried, to get out our pass or discharge, before a more dreadful monster than ever was read of in the legends of knight-errantry. They called him Great Menal. I can't tell what to compare it to better than to a chimera, a sphinx, a Cerberus, or to the image of Osiris, as the Egyptians represented him, with 3 heads, one of a roaring lion, t'other of a fawning cur, and the last of a howling, prowling wolf, twisted about with a dragon biting his tail, surrounded with fiery rays. His hands were full of gore, his talons like those of the harpies, his snout like a hawk's bill, his fangs or tusks like those of an overgrown brindled wild boar. His eyes were flaming like the jaws of hell, all covered with mortars interlaced with pestles, and nothing of his arms was to be seen but his clutches. His hutch and that of the Warren cats, his collaterals, was a long, spick-and-span new rack, atop of which, as the mumper told us, some large stately mangers were fixed in the reverse. Over the chief seat was the picture of an old woman holding the case or scabbard of a sickle in her right hand, a pair of scales in her left, with spectacles on her nose. The cups or scales of the balance were a pair of velvet pouches, the one full of bullion, which overpoised t'other, empty and long, hoisted higher than the middle of the beam. I'm of opinion it was the true effigies of Justice Gripmenall, far different from the institution of the ancient Thebans, who set up the statues of their dicasts without hands, in marble, silver, or gold, according to their merit, even after their death. When we made our personal appearance before him, a sort of I don't know what men, all clothed with I don't know what bags and pouches, with long scrolls in their clutches, made us sit down upon a cricket, such as criminals sit on when tried in France. Quoth Panurge to M, "Good my lords, I'm very well as I am. I'd as lief stand, an't please you. Besides, this same stool is somewhat of the lowest, for a man that has new breeches, and a short doublet." "Sit you down," said Gripmenall again, "and look that you don't make the court bid you twice. Now," continued he, "the earth shall immediately open its jaws, and swallow you up to quick damnation, if you don't answer as you should." Chapter 5.12. How Gripmenall propounded a riddle to us. When we were sat, Gripmenall, in the middle of his furred cats, called to us in a hoarse, dreadful voice, "Well, come on, give me presently an answer." "Well, come on," muttered Panurge between his teeth, give me presently a comforting dram." "Hearken to the court," continued Gripmenall. "An enigma. A young tight thing, as fair as may be, without a dad conceived a baby, and brought him forth without the pother in labor made by teeming mother. Yet the cursed brat feared not to gripe her, but gnawed, for haste, her sides like viper. Then the black upstart boldly sallies, and walks and flies o'er hills and valleys. Many fantastic sons of wisdom, amazed, foresaw their own and his doom, and thought like an old Grecian naughty. A human spirit moved his body. Give me out of hand an answer to this riddle," quoth Gripmenall. Give me leave to tell you, good my lord," answered Panurge, "that if I had but a sphinx at home, as Vares one of your precursors had, I might then solve your enigma presently. But verily, good my lord, I was not there, and, as I hope to be saved, am as innocent in the matter as the child unborn." "Foe, give me a better answer," cried Gripmenall, "or, by gold, this shall not serve your turn. I'll not be paid in such coin. If you have nothing better to offer, I'll let your rascalship know that it had been better for you to have fallen into Lucifer's own clutches than into ours. Dost thou see, here, sirrah? Huh? And dost thou prate here of thy being innocent, as if thou couldst be delivered from our racks and tortures for being so? Give me patience. Thou widgeon. Our laws are like cobwebs, your silly little flies are stopped, caught, and destroyed therein, but your stronger ones break them, and force and carry them which way they please. Likewise, don't think we are so mad as to set up our nets to snap up your great robbers and tyrants. No, they are somewhat too hard for us, there's no meddling with them, for they would make no more of us than we make of the little ones. But you paltry, silly, innocent wretches must make us amends, and, by gold, we will innocentize your fopship with a wanion, you never were so innocentized in your days. The devil shall sing mass among ye." Friar John, hearing him run on at that mad rate, had no longer the power to remain silent, but cried to him, "Hyde! Prithee, Mr. Devil in a coif, wouldst thou have a man tell thee more than he knows? Hasn't the fellow told you he does not know a word of the business? His name is Twyford. A plague rot you. Won't truth serve your turns?" "Why, how now, Mr. Prate-a-Pace," cried Gripmenall, taking him short, "marry come up. Who made you so saucy as to open your lips before you were spoken to?" Give me patience. By gold, this is the first time, since I have reigned, that anyone has had the impudence to speak before he was bidden. How came this mad fellow to break loose? Villain thou least, said Friar John, without stirring his lips. Sirrah, continued Grightmenall, I doubt thou wilt have business enough on thy hands when it comes to thy turn to answer. Damn thou least, said Friar John, silently. Dost thou think, continued my lord, thou art in the wilderness of your foolish university, wrangling and bawling among the idle, wandering searchers and hunters after truth? By gold, we have here other fish to fry. We go another gate's way to work, that we do. By gold, people here must give categorical answers to what they don't know. By gold, they must confess they have done those things which they have not nor ought to have done. By gold, they must protest that they know what they never knew in their lives. And, after all, patience perforce must be their only remedy, as well as a mad dog-s. Here silly geese are plucked, yet cackle not. Sirrah, give me an account whether you had a letter of attorney, or whether you were feed or no, that you offered to bawl in another man's cause. I see you had no authority to speak, and I may chance to have you wed to something you won't like. Oh, you devils, cried Friar John, proto-devils, panto-devils, you would wed a monk, would you? Ho-hu! Ho-hu! A heretic! A heretic! I'll give thee out for a rank heretic. Chapter 5.13 How Panurge Solved Grightmenall's Riddle. Grightmenall, as if he had not heard what Friar John said, directed his discourse to Panurge, saying to him, Well, what have you to say for yourself, Mr. Roganuff, ha? Give me out of hand an answer. Say. Quoth Panurge, Why, what would you have me say? I say that we are damnably beshit, since you give no heed at all to the equity of the plea, and the devil sings among you. Let this answer serve for all, I beseech you, and let us go out about our business. I am no longer able to hold out, as Gad shall judge me. Go to, cried Grightmenall. When did you ever hear that for these 300 years last past, anybody ever got out of this wheel without leaving something of his behind him? No, get out of the trap if you can without losing leather, life, or at least some hair, and you will have done more than ever was done yet. For why, this would bring the wisdom of the court into question, as if we had took you up for nothing, and dealt wrongfully by you. Well, by hook or by crook, we must have something out of you. Look ye, it is a folly to make a rout for a fart and a do. 1 word is as good as 20. I have no more to say to thee, but that, as thou likest thy former entertainment, thou wilt tell me more of the next. For it will go 10 times worse with thee unless, by gold, you give me a solution to the riddle I propounded. Give it, without any more ado. By gold, quoth Panurge, 'tis a black mite or weevil which is born of a white bean, and sallies out at the hole which he makes gnawing it. The mite being turned into a kind of fly, sometimes walks and sometimes flies over hills and dales. Now Pythagoras, the philosopher, and his sect, besides many others, wondering at its birth in such a place, which makes some argue for equivocal generation, thought that by a metempsychosis the body of that insect was the lodging of a human soul. Now, were you men here, after your welcome death, according to his opinion, your souls would most certainly enter into the body of mites or weevils. For in your present state of life you are good for nothing in the world but to gnaw, bite, eat, and devour all things, so in the next you'll e'en gnaw and devour your mother's very sides, as the vipers do. Now, by gold, I think I have fairly solved and resolved your riddle. May my bauble be turned into a nutcracker, quoth Friar John, if I could not almost find in my heart to wish that what comes out at my bunghole were beans, that these evil weevils might feed as they deserve. Panurge then, without any more ado, threw a large leathern purse stuffed with gold crowns, écus au solil among them. The furred lockats no sooner heard the jingling of the chink, but they all began to bestir their claws, like a parcel of fiddlers running a division, and then fell taut, squimble, squamble, catch that catch can. They all said aloud, These are the fees, these are the gloves. Now this is somewhat like a tansy. Oh, 'twas a pretty trial, a sweet trial, a dainty trial. Oh my word, they did not starve the cause. These are none of your sniveling forma pauperuses. No, they are noble clients, gentlemen every inch of them. By gold, it is gold, quoth Panurge, good old gold, I'll assure you. Saith Gripe Menall, the court, upon a full hearing of the gold, quoth Panurge, and weighty reasons given, finds the prisoners not guilty, and accordingly orders them to be discharged out of custody, paying their fees. Now, gentlemen, proceed, go forward, said he to us. We have not so much of the devil in us as we have of his hue. Though we are stout, we are merciful. As we came out at the wicket, we were conducted to the port by a detachment of certain Highland griffins, scriber cum dashus, who advised us before we came to our ships not to offer to leave the place until we had made the usual presents, first to the Lady Gripe Menall, then to all the furred lawpusses. Otherwise we must return to the place from whence we came. Well, well, said Friar John, we'll fumble in our fobs, examine every one of us his concern, and e'en give the women their due. We'll ne'er boggle or stick out on that account. As we tickled the men in the palm, we'll tickle the women in the right place. Pray, gentlemen, added they, don't forget to leave somewhat behind you for us poor devils to drink your healths. Oh, lad. Never fear, answered Friar John, I don't remember that I ever went anywhere yet where the poor devils are not remembered and encouraged. Chapter 5.14 How the Furred Lawcats Live on Corruption. Friar John had hardly said those words ere he perceived 78 galleys and frigates just arriving at the port. So he hied him thither to learn some news. And as he asked what goods they had aboard, he soon found that their whole cargo was venison, hares, capons, turkeys, pigs, swine, bacon, kids, calves, hens, ducks, teals, geese, and other poultry and wildfowl. He also spied among these some pieces of velvet, satin, and damask. This made him ask the newcomers whither, and to whom they were going to carry those dainty goods. They answered that they were for Gripe Menall and the furred lawcats. Pray, asked he, what is the true name of all these things in your country language? Corruption, they replied. If they live on corruption, said the friar, they will perish with their generation. May the devil be damned? Have it now. Their fathers devoured the good gentlemen who, according to their state of life, used to go much a-hunting and hawking, to be the better inured to toil in time of war. For hunting is an image of a martial life, and Xenophon was much in the right of it when he affirmed that hunting had yielded a great number of excellent warriors, as well as the Trojan horse. For my part I am no scholar, I have it but by hearsay, yet I believe it. Now the souls of those brave fellows, according to Gripe Menall's riddle, after their decease enter into wild boars, stags, roebucks, herns, and such other creatures which they loved, and in quest of which they went while they were men. And these furred lawcats, having first destroyed and devoured their castles, lands, domains, possessions, rents, and revenues, are still seeking to have their blood and soul in another life. What an honest fellow was that same Mumper who had forewarned us of all these things, and bid us take notice of the mangers above the racks. But said Panurge to the newcomers, how do you come by all this venison? Methinks the great king has issued out a proclamation strictly inhibiting the destroying of stags, does, wild boars, roebucks, or other royal game, on pain of death. All this is true enough, answered one for the rest, but the great king is so good and gracious, you must know, and these furred lawcats so cursed and cruel, so mad, and thirsting after Christian blood, that we have less cause to fear in trespassing against that mighty sovereign's commands than reason to hope to live if we do not continually stop the mouths of these furred lawcats with such bribes and corruption. Besides, added he, tomorrow Gripe Menall marries a furred lawpuss of his to a high and mighty double-furred lawtibert. Formerly we used to call them chop-hay, but alas, they are not such neat creatures now as to eat any, or chew the cud. We call them chop hares, chop partridges, chop woodcocks, chop pheasants, chop pullets, chop venison, chop conies, chop pigs, for they scorn to feed on coarser meat. A TD for their chops, cried Friar John. Next year we'll have M called chop dung, chop straunt, chop filth. Would you take my advice? Added he to the company. What is it? Answered we. Let's do two things, returned he. First, let us secure all this venison and wild fowl, I mean, paying well for them. For my part, I am but too much tired already with our salt meat, it heats my flanks so horribly. In the next place, let's go back to the wicket, and destroy all these devilish furred lawcats. For my part, quoth Panurge, I know better things, catch me there and hang me. No, I am somewhat more inclined to be fearful than bold. I love to sleep in a whole skin. Chapter 5.15. How Friar John talks of rooting out the furred lawcats. Virtue of the frock, quoth Friar John, what kind of voyage are we making? A shit one, oh my word. The devil of anything we do but fizzling, farting, funking, squattering, dozing, raving, and doing nothing. Odds belly, 'tisn't in my nature to lie idle, I mortally hate it. Unless am doing some heroic feat every foot, I can't sleep one wink o' nights. Damn it, did you then take me along with you for your chaplain, to sing mass and shrive you? By Maundy Thursday, the first of ye all that comes to me on such an account shall be fitted. For the only penance I'll enjoin shall be, that he immediately throw himself headlong overboard into the sea like a base cow-hearted son of 10 fathers. This in deduction of the pains of purgatory. What made Hercules such a famous fellow, d'ye think? Nothing but that while he traveled, he still made it his business to rid the world of tyrannies, errors, dangers, and drudgeries. He still put to death all robbers, all monsters, all venomous serpents and hurtful creatures. Why then do we not follow his example, doing as he did in the countries through which we pass? He destroyed the Stymphalides, the Lernaean Hydra, Cacus Antheus, the Centaurs, and what not. I am no clericus, those that are such tell me so. In imitation of that noble byblow, let's destroy and root out these wicked furred lawcats, that are a kind of ravenous devils. Thus we shall remove all manner of tyranny out of the land. Mahomet's tutor swallow me body and soul, tripes and guts, if I would stay to ask your help or advice in the matter were I but as strong as he was. Come, he that would be thought a gentleman, let him storm a town. Well then shall we go. I dare swear we'll do their business for them with a wet finger. They'll bear it, never fear. Since they could swallow down more foul language that came from us than 10 sows, and their babies could swill hogwash. Damn 'em, they don't value all the ill words or dishonor in the world at a rush, so they but get the coin into their purses, though they were to have it in a shit and clout. Come, we may chance to kill 'em all, as Hercules would have done had they lived in his time. We only want to be set to work by another Eurystheus, and nothing else for the present, unless it be what I heartily wish them, that Jupiter may give 'em a short visit, only some 2 or 3 hours long, and walk among their lordships in the same equipage that attended him when he came last to his Miss Semele, jolly Bacchus's mother. 'Tis a very great mercy, quoth Panurge, that you have got out of their clutches. For my part, I have no stomach to go there again. I'm hardly come to myself yet, so scared and appalled I was. My hair still stands up an end when I think on't, and most damnably troubled I was there, for 3 very weighty reasons. First, because I was troubled. Secondly, because I was troubled. Thirdly and lastly, because I was troubled. Hearken to me a little on thy right side, Friar John, my left cod, since thou'lt not hear at the other. Whenever the maggot bites thee to take a trip down to hell and visit the tribunal of Minos, Aeacus, Rhadamanthus, and Dis, do but tell me, and I'll be sure to bear thee company, and never leave thee as long as my name's Panurge, but will wade over Acheron, Styx, and Cocytus. Drink whole bumpers of Lethe's water, though I mortally hate that element, and even pay thy passage to that bawling, cross-grained ferryman, Charon. But as for the damned wicket, if thou art so weary of thy life as to go thither again, thou mayst e'en look for somebody else to bear thee company, for I'll not move one step that way. E'en rest satisfied with this positive answer. By my good will I'll not stir a foot to go thither as long as I live, any more than Calpe will come over to Abila. Here Motteux adds the following note. Calpe is a mountain in Spain that faces another, called Abila, in Mauritania, both said to have been severed by Hercules. Was Ulysses so mad as to go back into the Cyclops' cave to fetch his sword? No, marry was he not. Now I have left nothing behind me at the wicket through forgetfulness. Why then should I think of going thither? Well, quoth Friar John, as good sit still as rise up and fall. What cannot be cured must be endured. But prithee, let's hear one another speak. Come, wert thou not a wise doctor, to fling away a whole purse of gold on those mangy scoundrels? Huh? A squinsy choke thee. We were too rich, were we? Had it not been enough to have thrown the hellhounds a few cropped pieces of white cash? How could I help it? Returned Panurge. Did you not see how Gripe Manal held his gaping velvet pouch, and every moment roared and bellowed, "By gold, give me out of hand. By gold, give me presently." Now, thought I to myself, we shall never come off scot-free. I'll e'en stop their mouths with gold, that the wicket may be opened, and we may get out, the sooner the better. And I judged that lousy silver would not do the business. For, d'ye see, velvet pouches do not use to gape for little paltry clipped silver and small cash. No, they are made for gold, my friend John, that they are, my dainty cod. Ah! When thou hast been larded, basted, and roasted, as I was, thou wilt hardly talk at this rate, I doubt. But now what is to be done? We are enjoined by them to go forwards. The scabby slabberdigullions still waited for us at the port, expecting to be greased in the fist as well as their masters. Now when they perceived that we were ready to put to sea, they came to Friar John and begged that we would not forget to gratify the apparitors before we went off, according to the assessment for the fees at our discharge. "Hell and damnation!" cried Friar John, "are ye here still, ye bloodhounds, ye citing, scribbling imps of Satan? Rot you, am I not vexed enough already, but you must have the impudence to come and plague me, ye scurvy fly-catchers you. By Cobb's body, I'll gratify your ruffianships as you deserve. I'll apparatorize you presently with a wanion, that I will." With this, he lugged out his slashing cutlass, and in a mighty heat came out of the ship to cut the cozening varlets into steaks, but they scampered away and got out of sight in a trice. However, there was somewhat more to do, for some of our sailors, having got leave of Pantagruel to go ashore while we were had before gripe menal, had been at a tavern near the haven to make much of themselves, and roar it, as seamen will do when they come into some port. Now I don't know whether they had paid their reckoning to the full or no, but however it was, an old fat hostess, meeting Friar John on the quay, was making a woeful complaint before a sergeant, son-in-law to one of the furred lockats, and a brace of bums, his assistants. The friar, who did not much care to be tired with their impertinent prating, said to them, "Hark ye me, ye lubberly gnat-snappers. Do ye presume to say that our seamen are not honest men? I'll maintain they are, ye dotterels, and will prove it to your brazen faces, by justice I mean, this trusty piece of cold iron by my side." With this he lugged it out and flourished with it. The forlorn lobcocks soon showed him their backs, betaking themselves to their heels. But the old fusty landlady kept her ground, swearing like any butter whore that the tarpaulins were very honest cods, but that they only forgot to pay for the bed on which they had lain after dinner, and she asked 5 pence, French money, for the said bed. "May I never sup," said the friar, "if it be not dog cheap. They are sorry guests and unkind customers, that they are. They do not know when they have a pennyworth, and will not always meet with such bargains. Come, I myself will pay you the money, but I would willingly see it first." The hostess immediately took him home with her, and showed him the bed, and having praised it for all its good qualifications, said that she thought as times went she was not out of the way in asking 5 pence for it. Friar John then gave her the 5 pence, and she no sooner turned her back, but he presently began to rip up the ticking of the feather bed and bolster, and threw all the feathers out at the window. In the meantime, the old hag came down and roared out for help, crying out murder to set all the neighborhood in an uproar. Yet she also fell to gathering the feathers that flew up and down in the air, being scattered by the wind. Friar John let her bawl on, and, without any further ado, marched off with the blanket, quilt, and both the sheets, which he brought aboard undiscovered, for the air was darkened with the feathers, as it uses sometimes to be with snow. He gave them away to the sailors, then said to Pantagruel that beds were much cheaper at that place than in Chinenwa, though we have there the famous geese of Pottle. For the old beldam had asked him but 5 pence for a bed which in Chinenwa had been worth about 12 francs. As soon as Friar John and the rest of the company were embarked, Pantagruel set sail. But there arose a southeast wind, which blew so vehemently they lost their way, and in a manner going back to the country of the furred lockats, they entered into a huge gulf, where the sea ran so high and terrible that the shipboy on the top of the mast cried out he again saw the habitation of gripe menal. Upon which Panurge, frightened almost out of his wits, roared out, "Dear master, in spite of the wind and waves, change your course and turn the ship's head about. Oh, my friend, let us come no more into that cursed country where I left my purse." So the wind carried them near an island, where however they did not dare at first to land, but entered about a mile off. Mathieu omitted this passage altogether, in the edition of 1694. It was restored by Ozell in the edition of 1738. Chapter 5.16. How Pantagruel came to the island of the Apodefers, or ignoramuses, with long claws and crooked paws, and of terrible adventures and monsters there. As soon as we had cast anchor and had moored the ship, the pinnace was put over the ship's side and manned by the coxswain's crew. When the good Pantagruel had prayed publicly, and given thanks to the Lord that had delivered him from so great a danger, he stepped into it with his whole company to go on shore, which was no ways difficult to do. For, as the sea was calm and the winds laid, they soon got to the cliffs. When they were set on shore, Epistemon, who was admiring the situation of the place and the strange shape of the rocks, discovered some of the natives. The first he met had on a short purple gown, a doublet cut in panes, like a Spanish leather jerkin, half-sleeves of satin, and the upper part of them leather, a coif like a black pot tipped with tin. He was a good likely sort of a body, and his name, as we heard afterwards, was Doublefee. Epistemon asked him how they called those strange craggy rocks and deep valleys. He told them it was a colony brought out of a Tornaland and called Process, and that if we forded the river somewhat further beyond the rocks we should come into the island of the Apodefers. By the memory of the decretals, said Friar John, tell us, I pray you, what you honest men here live on. Could not a man take a chirping bottle with you to taste your wine? I can see nothing among you but parchment, inkhorns, and pens. We live on nothing else, returned Doublefee, and all who live in this place must come through my hands. How, quoth Panurge, are you a shaver then? Do you fleece M? I either purse, answered Doublefee, nothing else. By the foot of Pharaoh, cried Panurge, the devil a sou will you get of me. However, sweet sir, be so kind as to show an honest man the way to those Apodefers, or ignorant people, for I come from the land of the learned, where I did not learn overmuch. Still talking on, they got to the island of the Apodefers, for they were soon got over the ford. Pantagruel was not a little taken up with admiring the structure and habitation of the people of the place. For they live in a swinging wine press, 50 steps up to it. You must know there are some of all sorts, little, great, private, middle-sized, and so forth. You go through a large peristyle, alias a long entry set about with pillars, in which you see, in a kind of landscape, the ruins of almost the whole world, besides so many great robbers' gibbets, so many gallows and racks, that 'tis enough to fright you out of your 7 senses. Doublefee perceiving that Pantagruel was taken up with contemplating those things, let us go further, sir, said he to him. All this is nothing yet. Nothing, quotha, cried Friar John. By the soul of my overheated codpiece, friend Panurge and I here shake and quiver for mere hunger. I had rather be drinking than staring at these ruins. Pray come along, sir, said Doublefee. He then led us into a little wine press that lay backwards in a blind corner, and was called Pithies in the language of the country. You need not ask whether Master John and Panurge made much of their sweet selves there. It is enough that I tell you there was no want of Bologna sausages, turkey poots, capons, bustards, momsey, and all other sorts of good belly timber, very well dressed. A pimping son of 10 fathers, who, for want of a better, did the office of a butler, seeing that Friar John had cast a sheep's eye at a choice bottle that stood near a cupboard by itself, at some distance from the rest of the Betellic magazine, like a jack in an office, said to Pantagruel, Sir, I perceive that one of your men here is making love to this bottle. He ogles it and would fain caress it, but I beg that none offer to meddle with it, for it is reserved for their worships. How, cried Panurge, there are some grandees here then, I see. It is vintage time with you, I perceive. Then Doublefee led us up to a private staircase, and showed us into a room, whence, without being seen, out at a loophole we could see their worships in the great wine press, where none could be admitted without their leave. Their worships, as he called them, were about a score of fusty crack ropes and gallow clappers, or rather more, all posted before a bar, and staring at each other like so many dead pigs. Their paws were as long as a crane's foot, and their claws 24 inches long at least. For you must know they are enjoined never to pare off the least chip of them, so that they grow as crooked as a Welsh hook or a hedging bill. We saw a swinging bunch of grapes that are gathered and squeezed in that country, brought in by them. As soon as it was laid down, they clapped it into the press, and there was not a bit of it out of which each of them did not squeeze some oil of gold. Insomuch that the poor grape was tried with a witness, and brought off so drained and picked, and so dry, that there was not the least moisture, juice, or substance left in it, for they had pressed out its very quintessence. Double Fee told us they had not often such huge bunches, but, let the worst come to the worst, they were sure never to be without others in their press. But hark you me, master of mine, asked Panurge, have they not some of different growth? Ay, marry have they, quoth Double Fee. Do you see here this little bunch, to which they are going to give t'other wrench? It is of tithe growth, you must know. They crushed, wrung, squeezed, and strained out the very heart's blood of it but the other day. But it did not bleed freely. The oil came hard, and smelt of the priest's chest, so that they found there was not much good to be got out of it. Why then, said Pantagruel, do they put it again into the press? Only, answered Double Fee, for fear there should still lurk some juice among the husks and hullings in the mother of the grape. The devil be damned, cried Friar John. Do you call these same folks illiterate lobcocks and dunsical dodipals? May I be broiled like a red herring, if I do not think they are wise enough to skin a flint and draw oil out of a brick wall. So they are, said Double Fee, for they sometimes put castles, parks, and forests into the press, and out of them all extract aurum potabile. You mean portabile, I suppose, cried Epistemon, such as may be born. I mean, as I said, replied Double Fee, potabile, such as may be drunk, for it makes them drink many a good bottle more than otherwise they should. But I cannot better satisfy you, as to the growth of the vine-tree syrup that is here squeezed out of grapes, than in desiring you to look yonder in that backyard, where you will see above 1,000 different growths that lie waiting to be squeezed every moment. Here are some of the public and some of the private growth. Some of the builders' fortifications, loans, gifts, and gratuities, escheats, forfeitures, fines, and recoveries, penal statutes, crown lands and domain, privy purse, post offices, offerings, lordships of manors, and a world of other growths, for which we want names. Pray, quoth Epistemon, tell me of what growth is that great one, with all those little grapelings about it. Oh, so, returned Double Fee, that plump one is of the treasury, the very best growth in the whole country. Whenever any one of that growth is squeezed, there is not one of their worships, but gets juice enough of it to soak his nose 6 months together. When their worships were up, Pantagruel desired Double Fee to take us into that great wine press, which he readily did. As soon as we were in, Epistemon, who understood all sorts of tongues, began to show us many devices on the press, which was large and fine, and made of the wood of the crossat least Double Fee told us so. On each part of it were names of everything in the language of the country. The spindle of the press was called receipt, the trough, cost and damages, the hole for the vice-bin state, the sideboards, money paid into the office, the great beam, respite of homage, the branches, radiator, the side beams, recuperator, the fats ignoramus, the two-handled basket, the rolls, the treading place acquittance, the dossers, validation, the panniers, authentic decrees, the pails, potentials, the funnels, quietus est. By the queen of the chitlins, quoth Panurge, all the hieroglyphics of Egypt are mine to this jargon. Why? Here are a parcel of words full as analogous as chalk and cheese, or a cat and a cartwheel. But why, prithee, dear Double Fee, do they call these worshipful dons of yours ignorant fellows? Only, said Double Fee, because they neither are, nor ought to be, clerks, and all must be ignorant as to what they transact here. Nor is there to be any other reason given, but the court hath said it. The court will have it so. The court has decreed it. Cop's body, quoth Pantagruel, they might full as well have called necessity, for necessity has no law. From thence, as he was leading us to see 1,000 little puny presses, we spied another paltry bar, about which sat 4 or 5 ignorant waspish churls, of so testy, fuming a temper, like an ass with squibs and crackers tied to its tail, and so ready to take pepper in the nose for yea and nay, that a dog would not have lived with M. They were hard at it with the lees and dregs of the grapes, which they gripped over and over again, might and main, with their clenched fists. They were called contractors, in the language of the country. These are the ugliest, misshapen, grim-looking scrubs, said Friar John, that ever were beheld, with or without spectacles. Then we passed by an infinite number of little pimping winepresses, all full of vintage mongers, who were picking, examining, and raking the grapes with some instruments called bills of charge. Finally, we came into a hall downstairs, where we saw an overgrown, cursed, mangy cur with a pair of heads, a wolf's belly, and claws like the devil of hell. The son of a bitch was fed with costs, for he lived on a multiplicity of fine almonds and amerciaments by order of their worships, to each of whom the monster was worth more than the best farm in the land. In their tongue of ignorance, they called him twofold. His dam lay by him, and her hair and shape was like her whelp's, only she had 4 heads, 2 male and 2 female, and her name was fourfold. She was certainly the most cursed and dangerous creature of the place, except her grandam, which we saw, and had been kept locked up in a dungeon time out of mind, and her name was refusing of fees. Friar John, who had always 20 yards of gut ready empty to swallow a gallimaufry of lawyers, began to be somewhat out of humor, and desired Pantagruel to remember he had not dined, and bring double fee along with him. So away we went, and as we marched out at the back gate, whom should we meet but an old piece of mortality in chains? He was half ignorant and half learned, like an hermaphrodite of Satan. The fellow was all caparisoned with spectacles, as a tortoise is with shells, and lived on nothing but a sort of food which, in their gibberish, was called appeals. Pantagruel asked Doublefee of what breed was that prothonotary, and what name they gave him. Doublefee told us that time out of mind he had been kept there in chains, to the great grief of their worships, who starved him, and his name was Review. By the Pope's sanctified 2-pounders, cried Friar John, I do not much wonder at the meagre cheer which this old chuff finds among their worships. Do but look a little on the weather-beaten scratch-toby, friend Panurge. By the sacred tip of my cowl, I'll lay 5 pounds to a hazelnut the foul thief has the very looks of gripe-me now. These same fellows here, ignorant as they be, are as sharp and knowing as other folk. But were it my case, I would send him packing with a squib in his breech like a rogue as he is. By my oriental barnacles, quoth Panurge, honest friar, thou art in the right. For if we but examine that treacherous Review's ill-favoured phiz, we find that the filthy snudge is yet more mischievous and ignorant than these ignorant wretches here, since they honest dunces grapple and glean with as little harm and pother as they can, without any long fiddlecumb farts or tantalizing in the case. Nor do they dally and demur in your suit, but in 2 or 3 words, whip-stitch in a trice, they finish the vintage of the close, baiting you all these damned tedious interlocutories, examinations, and appointments which fret to the heart's blood your furred lockhats. Chapter 5.17 How we went forwards, and how Panurge had like to have been killed. We put to sea that very moment, steering our course forwards, and gave Pantagruel a full account of our adventures, which so deeply struck him with compassion that he wrote some elegies on that subject to divert himself during the voyage. When we were safe in the port, we took some refreshment, and took in fresh water and wood. The people of the place, who had the countenance of jolly fellows and boon companions, were all of them forward folks, bloated and puffed up with fat. And we saw some who slashed and pinked their skins to open a passage to the fat, that it might swell out at the slits and gashes which they made. Neither more nor less than the ship-breech fellows in our country bepink, and cut open their breeches that the taffety on the inside may stand out and be puffed up. They said that what they did was not out of pride or ostentation, but because otherwise their skins would not hold them without much pain. Having thus slashed their skin, they used to grow much bigger, like the young trees on whose barks the gardeners make incisions that they may grow the better. Near the haven there was a tavern, which forward seemed very fine and stately. We repaired thither, and found it filled with people of the forward nation, of all ages, sexes, and conditions, so that we thought some notable feast or other was getting ready. But we were told that all that throng were invited to the bursting of mine host, which caused all his friends and relations to hasten thither. We did not understand that jargon, and therefore thought in that country by that bursting they meant some merry meeting or other, as we do in ours by betrothing, wedding, groaning, christening, churching of women, shearing of sheep, reaping of corn or harvest home, and many other junketing bouts that end in ing. But we soon heard that there was no such matter in hand. The master of the house, you must know, had been a good fellow in his time, loved heartily to wind up his bottom, to bang the pitcher and lick his dish. He used to be a very fair swallower of gravy soup, a notable accountant in matter of hours, and his whole life was one continual dinner, like mine host at Rouillac in Perigord. But now, having farted out much fat for 10 years together, according to the custom of the country, he was drawing towards his bursting hour. For neither the inner thin kell wherewith the entrails are covered, nor his skin that had been jagged and mangled so many years, were able to hold and enclose his guts any longer, or hinder them from forcing their way out. Pray, quoth Panurge, is there no remedy, no help for the poor man, good people? Why don't you swaddle him round with good tight girths, or secure his natural tub with a strong sorb-apple tree hoop? Nay, why don't you iron bind him, if needs be? This would keep the man from flying out and bursting. The word was not yet out of his mouth when we heard something give a loud report, as if a huge sturdy oak had been split in two. Then some of the neighbors told us that the bursting was over, and that the clap or crack which we heard was the last fart, and so there was an end of mine host. This made me call to mind a saying of the venerable abbot of Castelliers, the very same who never cared to hump his chambermaids but when he was in pontificalibus. That pious person, being much dunned, teased, and importuned by his relations to resign his abbey in his old age, said and professed that he would not strip till he was ready to go to bed, and that the last fart which his reverend paternity was to utter should be the fart of an abbot. Chapter 5.18. How our ships were stranded, and we were relieved by some people that were subject to Queen Whims, qui tangent de la Quint. We weighed and set sail, with a merry westerly gale. When about 7 leagues off, 22 miles, some gusts or scuds of wind suddenly arose, and the wind veering and shifting from point to point was, as they say, like an old woman's breech at no certainty. So we first got our starboard tacks aboard and hauled off our lee sheets. Then the gusts increased, and by fits blowed all at once from several quarters, yet we neither settled nor braided up close our sails, but only let fly the sheets, not to go against the master of the ship's direction. And thus having let go amain, lest we should spend our topsails, or the ship's quick side should lie in the water and she be overset, we lay by and run adrift. That is, in a landloper's phrase, we temporized it. For he assured us that, as these gusts and whirlwinds would not do us much good, so they could not do us much harm, considering their easiness and pleasant strife, as also the clearness of the sky and calmness of the current. So that we were to observe the philosopher's rule, bear and forbear, that is, trim or go according to the time. However, these whirlwinds and gusts lasted so long that we persuaded the master to let us go and lie at try with our main course. That is, to haul the tack aboard, the sheet close aft, the bowline set up, and the helm tied close aboard. So, after a stormy gale of wind, we broke through the whirlwind. But it was like falling into Scylla, to avoid Charybdis, out of the frying pan into the fire. For we had not sailed a league ere our ships were stranded upon some sands, such as are the flats of St. Maxent. All our company seemed mightily disturbed, except Friar John, who was not a jot daunted, and with sweet sugar-plum words comforted now one and then another, giving them hopes of speedy assistance from above, and telling them that he had seen Castor at the main yard-arm. "Oh, that I were but now ashore," cried Panurge, "that is all I wish for myself at present, and that you who like the sea so well had each man of you 200,000 crowns. I would fairly let you set up shop on these sands, and would get a fat calf dressed and 100 of faggots, i.e., bottles of wine, cooled for you against you come ashore. I freely consent never to mount a wife, so you but set me ashore and mount me on a horse, that I may go home. No matter for a servant, I will be contented to serve myself. I am never better treated than when I am without a man." Faith, old Plautus was in the right on't when he said the more servants the more crosses. For such they are, even supposing they could want what they all have but too much of, a tongue, that most busy, dangerous, and pernicious member of servants. Accordingly, 'twas for their sakes alone that the racks and tortures for confession were invented, though some foreign civilians in our time have drawn illogical and unreasonable consequences from it. That very moment we spied a sail that made towards us. When it was close by us, we soon knew what was the lading of the ship and who was aboard of her. She was full freighted with drums. I was acquainted with many of the passengers that came in her, who were most of good families. Among the rest, Harry Coderell, an old toast, who had got a swinging ass's touch-stripe, penis, fastened to his waist, as the good women's beads are to their girdle. In his left hand, he held an old overgrown greasy fowl cap, such as your scald-pated fellows wear, and in the right a huge cabbage stump. As soon as he saw me, he was overjoyed, and bawled out to me, "What cheer, ho! How dost like me now? Behold the true Algamana," this he said, showing me the ass's tickle gizzard. "This doctor's cap is my true elixir. And this," continued he, shaking the cabbage stump in his fist, "is lunaria major, you old naughty. I have old boy, I have will make when thou't come back. But pray, father," said I, "whence come you? Whither are you bound? What's your lading? Have you smelt the salt deep?" To these 4 questions he answered, from Queen Whims, for Turin, alchemy, to the very bottom. "Whom have you got board?" said I. Said he, "Astrologers, fortune-tellers, alchemists, rhymers, poets, painters, projectors, mathematicians, watchmakers, sing-songs, musicianers, and the devil and all of others that are subject to Queen Whims." Motteux gives the following footnote. La quint. This means a fantastic humor, maggots, or a foolish giddiness of brains, and also a fifth or the proportion of 5 in music, and c. They have very fair legible patents to show for't, as anybody may see. Panurge had no sooner heard this but he was upon the high rope, and began to rail at them like mad. "What devil d'ye mean," cried he, "to sit idly here like a pack of loitering sneaksbees, and see us stranded, while you may help us, and tow us off into the current? A plague your whims. You can make all things whatsoever, they say, so much as good weather and little children, yet won't make haste to fasten some hawsers and cables, and get us off." "I was just coming to set you afloat," quoth Harry Coderell. "By Trismegistus, I'll clear you in a trice." With this he caused 7,532,810 huge drums to be unheaded on one side, and set that open side so that it faced the end of the streamers and pendants, and having fastened them to good tacklings and our ship's head to the stern of theirs, with cables fastened to the bits abaft the manger in the ship's loof, they towed us off ground at one pull so easily and pleasantly that you'd have wondered at it had you been there. For the dub-a-dub rattling of the drums, with the soft noise of the gravel witch murmuring, disputed us our way, and the merry cheers and huzzas of the sailors made in harmony almost as good as that of the heavenly bodies when they roll and are whirled round their spheres, which rattling of the celestial wheels Plato said he heard some nights in his sleep. We scorned to be behindhand with in civility, and gratefully gave store of our sausages and chitlins, with which we filled their drums, and we were just hoisting 62 hogsheads of wine out of the hold, when 2 huge whirlpools with great fury made towards their ship, spouting more water than is in the river Vienne, from Chinon to Sommer. To make short, all their drums, all their sails, their concerns, and themselves were soused, and their very hose were watered by the collar. Panurge was so overjoyed, seeing this, and laughed so heartily, that he was forced to hold his sides, and it set him into a fit of the colic for 2 hours and more. "I had a mind," quoth he, "to make the dogs drink, and those honest whirlpools, egad, have saved me that labor and that cost. There's sauce for them, Ariston men Eudor. Water is good, saith a poet, let pinderize up on't. They never cared for fresh water, but to wash their hands or their glasses. This good salt water will stand, in good stead for want of sal ammoniac, and niter in Jebber's kitchen." We could not hold any further discourse with for the former whirlwind hindered our ship from feeling the helm. The pilot advised us henceforwards to let her run adrift and follow the stream, not busying ourselves with anything, but making much of our carcasses. For our only way to arrive safe at the queendom of whims was to trust to the whirlwind and be led by the current. Chapter 5.19. How we arrived at the queendom of whims or entelechy. We did as he directed us for about 12 hours, and on the 3rd day the sky seemed to us somewhat clearer, and we happily arrived at the port of Matotechny, not far distant from Queen Whims, alias the Quintessence. We met full butt on the quay, a great number of guards and other military men that garrisoned the arsenal, and we were somewhat frighted at first because they made us all lay down our arms, and in a haughty manner asked us whence we came. Cousin, quoth Panurge to him that asked the question, we are of Touraine, and come from France, being ambitious of paying our respects to the Lady Quintessence, and visit this famous realm of entelechy. What do you say? Cried they, do you call it entelechy or indelichy? Truly, truly, sweet cousins, quoth Panurge, we are a silly sort of grout-headed lobcocks, an't please you. Be so kind as to forgive us if we chance to knock words out of joint. As for anything else, we are downright honest fellows and true hearts. We have not asked you this question without a cause, said they. For a great number of others who have passed this way from your country of Touraine seemed as mere jolt-headed dodipals as ever were scored o'er the coxcomb, yet spoke as correct as other folks. But there has been here from other countries a pack of I know not what overweening self-conceited prigs, as moody as so many mules and as stout as any Scotch lairds, and nothing would serve these, forsooth, but they must wilfully wrangle and stand out against us at their coming, and much they got by it after all. Troth, we an fitted them and clawed 'em off with a vengeance, for all they looked so big and so grum. Pray tell me, does your time lie so heavy upon you in your world, that you do not know how to bestow it better than in thus impudently talking, disputing, and writing of our sovereign lady? There was much need that your Tully, the consul, should go and leave the care of his commonwealth to busy himself idly about her. And after him your Diogenes Laertius, the biographer, and your Theodorus Gaza, the philosopher, and your Argyropoulos, the emperor and your Bessario, the cardinal and your Politian, the pedant, and your Beauteous, the judge, and your Lascaris, the ambassador, and the devil, and all of those you call lovers of wisdom, whose number, it seems, was not thought great enough already, but lately your Scaliger, Bigot, Chambrier, Francis Fleury, and I cannot tell how many such other junior sneaking fly blows must take upon to increase it. A squinsy gripe the cod's-headed changelings at the swallow, and eke at the cover weasel. We shall make but the deuce take They flatter the devil here and smoothify his name, quoth Panurge, between his teeth. You don't come here, continued the captain, to uphold in their folly. You have no commission from to this effect. Well then, we will talk no more on't. Aristotle, that first of men and peerless pattern of all philosophy, was our sovereign lady's godfather, and wisely and properly gave her the name of entelechy. Her true name then is entelechy, and may he be entail beshit, and entail a shit-abed faculty and nothing else on his family, who dares call her by any other name. For whoever he is, he does her wrong, and is a very impudent person. You are heartily welcome, gentlemen. With this they called and clipped us about the neck, which was no small comfort to us, I'll assure you. Panurge then whispered me, fellow traveller, quoth he, hast thou not been somewhat afraid this bout? A little, said I. To tell you the truth of it, quoth he, never were the Ephraimites in a greater fear and quandary when the Gileadites killed, and drowned them for saying Sibboleth instead of Shibboleth. And among friends, let me tell you that perhaps there is not a man in the whole country of Beauce, but might easily have stopped my bunghole with a cartload of hay. The captain afterwards took us to the Queen's palace, leading us silently with great formality. Pantagruel would have said something to him, but the other, not being able to come up to his height, wished for a ladder or a very long pair of stilts. Then said, Patience, if it were our sovereign lady's will, we would be as tall as you. Well, we shall when she pleases. In the first galleries, we saw great numbers of sick persons, differently placed according to their maladies. The leprous were apart, those that were poisoned on one side, those that had got the plague on another, those that had the pox in the first rank, and the rest accordingly. Chapter 5.2 How the Quintessence cured the sick with a song. The captain showed us the Queen, attended with her ladies and gentlemen, in the second gallery. She looked young, though she was at least 1800 years old, and was handsome, slender, and as fine as a queen, that is, as hands could make her. He then said to us, It is not yet a fit time to speak to the Queen, be you but mindful of her doings in the meanwhile. You have kings in your world that fantastically pretend to cure some certain diseases, as, for example, scrofula or wens, swelled throats, nicknamed the king's evil, and quartan agues, only with a touch. Now our Queen cures all manner of diseases without so much as touching the sick, but barely with a song, according to the nature of the distemper. He then showed us a set of organs, and said that, when it was touched by her, those miraculous cures were performed. The organ was indeed the strangest that ever eyes beheld. For the pipes were of cassia fistula in the cod, the top and cornice of guiacum, the bellows of rhubarb, the pettas of turbith, and the clavier or keys of scammony. While we were examining this wonderful new make of an organ, the leprous were brought in by her abstractors, spotizators, masticators, progustix tabachins, chachinins, nemonins, rabrabins, nursins, rosuins, nebidins terrans, sigamians, pararins, chassinins, sarins, sotines, aboth, anilins, archasdarpenins, mebins, chabarins, and other officers, for whom I want names. So she played I don't know what sort of a tune or song, and they were all immediately cured. Then those who were poisoned were had in, and she had no sooner given them a song, but they began to find a use for their legs, and up they got. Then came on the deaf, the blind, and the dumb, and they too were restored to their lost faculties and senses with the same remedy, which did so strangely amaze us, and not without reason, I think, that down we fell on our faces, remaining prostrate, like men ravished in ecstasy, and were not able to utter one word through the excess of our admiration, till she came, and having touched Pantagruel with a fine fragrant nosegay of white roses which she held in her hand, thus made us recover our senses and get up. Then she made us the following speech in bison words, such as Parasates desired should be spoken to her son Cyrus, or at least of crimson alamode. The probity that scintillizes in the superfices of your persons informs my ratiocinating faculty, in a most stupendous manner, of the radiant virtues latent within the precious caskets and ventricles of your minds. For, contemplating the mellifluous suavity of your thrice discreet reverences, it is impossible not to be persuaded with facility that neither your affections nor your intellects are vitiated with any defect or privation of liberal and exalted sciences. Far from it, all must judge that in you are lodged a cornucopia and encyclopedia, an unmeasurable profundity of knowledge in the most peregrine and sublime disciplines, so frequently the admiration, and so rarely the concomitants of the imperate vulgar. This gently compels me, who in preceding times indefatigably kept my private affections absolutely subjugated, to condescend to make my application to you in the trivial phrase of the plebeian world, and assure you that you are well, more than most heartily welcome. I have no hand at making of speeches, quoth Panurge to me privately. Prithee, man, make answer to her for us, if thou canst. This would not work with me, however, neither did Pantagruel return a word. So that Queen Whims, or Queen Quintessence, which you please, perceiving that we stood as mute as fishes, said, Your taciturnity speaks you not only disciples of Pythagoras, from whom the venerable antiquity of my progenitors in successive propagation was emanated and derives its original, but also discovers that through the revolution of many retrograde moons, you have in Egypt pressed the extremities of your fingers with the hard tenons of your mouths, and scalptized your heads with frequent applications of your unguicules. In the school of Pythagoras, taciturnity was the symbol of abstracted and superlative knowledge, and the silence of the Egyptians was agnated as an expressive manner of divine adoration. This caused the pontiffs of Hierapolis to sacrifice to the great deity in silence, impercussively, without any vociferous or obstreperous sound. My design is not to enter into a privation of gratitude towards you, but by a vivacious formality, though matter were to abstract itself from me, excentricate to you my cogitations. Having spoken this, she only said to her officers, tabachins, a panacea, and straight they desired us not to take it amiss if the queen did not invite us to dine with her. For she never ate anything at dinner but some categories, Jacobots, emnins, dimions, abstractions, harborins, chelamins, second intentions, caradoths, antitheses, metempsychoses, transcendent prolepsies, and such other light food. Then they took us into a little closet lined through with alarums, where we were treated God knows how. It is said that Jupiter writes whatever is transacted in the world on the diphthera or skin of the Amalthean goat that suckled him in Crete, which pelt served him instead of a shield against the Titans, whence he was nicknamed Aegiachos. Now, as I hate to drink water, brother topers, I protest it would be impossible to make 18 goatskins hold the description of all the good meat they brought before us, though it were written in characters as small as those in which were penned Homer's Iliads, which Tully tells us he saw enclosed in a nutshell. For my part, had I 100 mouths, as many tongues, a voice of iron, a heart of oak, and lungs of leather, together with the mellifluous abundance of Plato, yet I never could give you a full account of a third part of a second of the whole. Pantagruel was telling me that he believed the queen had given the symbolic word used among her subjects to denote sovereign good cheer, when she said to her tabachins, a panacea, just as Lucullus used to say in Apollo when he designed to give his friends a singular treat, though sometimes they took him at unawares, as, among the rest, Cicero and Hortensius sometimes used to do. Chapter 5.21. How the Queen passed her time after dinner. When we had dined, a Chachanin led us into the Queen's hall, and there we saw how, after dinner, with the ladies and the princes of her court, she used to sift, searce, bolt, range, and pass away time with a fine large white and blue silk sieve. We also perceived how they revived ancient sports, diverting themselves together at 1. Cordax, Phrygia, Menagas, 2. Aemilia, Thracia, Terminalia, 3. Sicinia, Calabrisme, Floralia, 4. Jambyx, Molossia, Pyrrhus, 5. Persica, Cerniphorum, Nicotism, and 1,000 other dances. Matthew has the following footnote: 1. A sort of country dance. 2. A still tragic dance. 3. Dancing and singing used at funerals. 4. Cutting sarcasms and lampoons. 5. The Persian dance. 6. Tunes, whose measure inspired men with a kind of divine fury. 7. The Thracian movement. 8. Smutty verses. 9. A measure to which the Molossi of Epirus danced a certain Morris. 10. A dance with bowls or pots in their hands. 11. A song where one sings alone. 12. Sports at the holidays of the god of bounds. 13. Dancing naked at Flora's holidays. 14. The Trojan dance in armor. Afterwards, she gave orders that they should show us the apartments and curiosities in her palace. Accordingly, we saw there such new, strange, and wonderful things that I am still ravished in admiration every time I think oft. However, nothing surprised us more than what was done by the gentlemen of her household, abstractors, parisans, nebidins, spotizators, and others, who freely and without the least dissembling told us that the queen their mistress did all impossible things and cured men of incurable diseases, and they, her officers, used to do the rest. I saw there a young Parisian cure many of the new consumption, I mean the pox, though they were never so peppered. Had it been the rankest Rhone ague, Anglis, the Covent Garden gout, 'twas all one to him. Touching only their dentiform vertebrae thrice with a piece of a wooden shoe, he made them as wholesome as so many sucking pigs. Another did thoroughly cure folks of dropsies, tympanies, ascites, and hyposarsides, striking them on the belly 9 times with a Tenedian hatchet, without any solution of the continuum. Another cured all manner of fevers and agues on the spot, only with hanging a foxtail on the left side of the patient's girdle. One removed the toothache only with washing thrice the root of the aching tooth with elder vinegar, and letting it dry half an hour in the sun. Another the gout, whether hot or cold, natural or accidental, by barely making the gouty person shut his mouth and open his eyes. I saw another ease 9 gentlemen of St. Francis's distemper, a consumption in the pocket, or want of money. Those of St. Francis's order must carry none about Matthew. In a very short space of time, having clapped a rope about their necks, at the end of which hung a box with 10,000 gold crowns in't. One with a wonderful engine threw the houses out at the windows, by which means they were purged of all pestilential air. Another cured all the 3 kinds of hectics, the tabid, atrophies, and emaciated, without bathing, tabian milk, dropax, alias depilatory, or other such medicaments, only turning the consumptive for 3 months into monks, and he assured me that if they did not grow fat and plump in a monastic way of living, they never would be fattened in this world, either by nature or by art. I saw another surrounded with a crowd of two sorts of women. Some were young, quaint, clever, neat, pretty, juicy, tight, brisk, buxom, proper, kind-hearted, and as right as my leg, to any man's thinking. The rest were old, weather-beaten, overridden, toothless, blear-eyed, tough, wrinkled, shriveled, tawny, moldy, phthisicky, decrepit hags, beldams, and walking carcasses. We were told that his office was to cast anew those she-pieces of antiquity, and make them such as the pretty creatures whom we saw, who had been made young again that day, recovering at once the beauty, shape, size, and disposition which they enjoyed at 16, except their heels, that were now much shorter than in their former youth. This made them yet more apt to fall backwards whenever any man happened to touch M than they had been before. As for their counterparts, the old Mother Scratch-Tobies, they most devoutly waited for the blessed hour when the batch that was in the oven was to be drawn, that they might have their turns, and in a mighty haste they were pulling and hauling the man like mad, telling him that 'tis the most grievous and intolerable thing in nature for the tail to be on fire and the head to scare away those who should quench it. The officer had his hands full, never wanting patience, neither did his place bring him in little, you may swear. Pantagruel asked him whether he could also make old men young again. He said he could not. But the way to make them new men was to get M to cohabit with a new caste female. For this, they caught that fifth kind of crinkams, which some call pelade in Greek ophiaces, that makes them cast off their old hair and skin, just as the serpents do, and thus their youth is renewed like the Arabian phoenix. This is the true fountain of youth, for there the old and decrepit become young, active, and lusty. Just so, as Euripides tells us, Iolaus was transmogrified, and thus Phaon, for whom kind-hearted Sappho run wild, grew young again for Venus's use, so Tithon by Aurora's means, so Aeson by Medea and Jason also, who, if you'll believe Pherecydes and Simonides, was new-vamped and died by that witch. And so were the nurses of jolly Bacchus and their husbands, as Aeschylus relates. Chapter 5.22. How Queen Whim's officers were employed, and how the said lady retained us among her abstractors. I then saw a great number of the Queen's officers, who made blackamoors white as fast as hops, just rubbing their bellies with the bottom of a pannier. Others, with 3 couples of foxes in one yoke, plowed a sandy shore, and did not lose their seed. Others washed burnt tiles, and made them lose their color. Others extracted water out of pumice stones, braying them a good while in a mortar, and changed their substance. Others sheared asses, and thus got long fleece wool. Others gathered barberries and figs off of thistles. Others stroked he-goats by the dugs, and saved their milk in a sieve, and much they got by it. Others washed asses' heads without losing their soap. Others taught cows to dance, and did not lose their fiddling. Others pitched nets to catch the wind, and took cock-lobsters in them. I saw a spotizator, who very artificially got farts out of a dead ass, and sold M for 5 pence an ell. Another did putrefy beetles. Oh, the dainty food! Poor Panurge fairly cast up his accounts, and gave up his halfpenny, i.e. vomited, seeing an arch-hasdar pennon who laid a huge plenty of chamber lie to putrefy in horse-dung, mishmashed with abundance of Christian surreverence. Pug fie upon him, nasty dog. However, he told us that with this sacred distillation, he watered kings and princes, and made their sweet lives a fathom or 2 the longer. Others built churches to jump over the steeples. Others set carts before the horses, and began to flay eels at the tail, neither did the eels cry before they were hurt, like those of Melon. Others out of nothing made great things, and made great things return to nothing. Others cut fire into stakes with a knife, and drew water with a fishnet. Others made chalk of cheese, and honey of a dog's td. We saw a knot of others, about a baker's dozen in number, tippling under an arbor. They toped out of jolly bottomless cups 4 sorts of cool, sparkling, pure, delicious vine-tree syrup, which went down like mother's milk, and healths and bumpers flew about like lightning. We were told that these true philosophers were fairly multiplying the stars by drinking till the 7 were 14, as brawny Hercules did with Atlas. Others made a virtue of necessity, and the best of a bad market, which seemed to me a very good piece of work. Others made alchemy, i.e. surreverence with their teeth, and clapping their hind retort to the recipient, made scurvy faces and then squeezed. Others, in a large grass plot, exactly measured how far the fleas could go at a hop, a step, and jump, and told us that this was exceedingly useful for the ruling of kingdoms, the conduct of armies, and the administration of commonwealths. And that Socrates, who first got philosophy out of heaven, and from idling and trifling made it profitable and of moment, used to spend half his philosophizing time in measuring the leaps of fleas, as Aristophanes the quintessential affirms. I saw 2 gibberins by themselves keeping watch on the top of a tower, and we were told they guarded the moon from the wolves. In a blind corner, I met 4 more very hot at it, and ready to go to loggerheads. I asked what was the cause of the stir and ado, the mighty coil and pother they made. And I heard that for 4 livelong days those overwise roysters had been at it ding-dong, disputing on 3 high, more than metaphysical propositions, promising themselves mountains of gold by solving them. The first was concerning a hias, shadow, the second of the smoke of a lantern, and the third of goat's hair, whether it were wool or no. We heard that they did not think it a bit strange that 2 contradictions in mode, form, figure, and time should be true, though I will warrant the sophists of Paris had rather be unchristened than own so much. While we were admiring all those men's wonderful doings, the evening star already twinkling, the queen, God bless her, appeared, attended with her court, and again amazed and dazzled us. She perceived it and said to us, "What occasions the aberrations of human cogitations, through the perplexing labyrinths and abysses of admiration, is not the source of the effects, which sagacious mortals visibly experience to be the consequential result of natural causes. 'Tis the novelty of the experiment which makes impressions on their conceptive, cogitative faculties, that do not provise the facility of the operation adequately, with a subact and sedate intellection, associated with diligent and congruous study. Consequently, let all manner of perturbation abdicate the ventricles of your brains, if anyone has invaded them while they were contemplating what is transacted by my domestic ministers. Be spectators and auditors of every particular phenomenon and every individual proposition within the extent of my mansion. Satiate yourselves with all that can fall here under the consideration of your visual or auscultating powers, and thus emancipate yourselves from the servitude of crassous ignorance. And that you may be induced to apprehend how sincerely I desire this in consideration of the studious cupidity that so demonstratively emicates at your external organs, from this present particle of time I retain you as my abstractors. Geber, my principal tabachin, shall register and initiate you at your departing." We humbly thanked her queenship without saying a word, accepting of the noble office she conferred on us. Chapter 5.23. How the Queen was served at dinner, and of her way of eating. Queen Whims after this said to her gentlemen, "The orifice of the ventricle, that ordinary embassador for the alimentation of all members, whether superior or inferior, importunes us to restore, by the apposition of idoneous sustenance, what was dissipated by the internal calidity's action on the radical humidity. Therefore spotizators, jessanins, memanes, and parazins be not culpable of dilatory protractions in the apposition of every reroborating species, but rather let them pullulate and superabound on the tables. As for you, nobilissime pregustators, and my gentilissime masticators, your frequently experimented industry, internected with pertiligent sedulity and sedulous pertiligence, continually adjuvates you to propitiate all things in so expeditious a manner that there is no necessity of exciting in you a cupidity to consummate them. Therefore, can only suggest to you still to operate, as you are assuffected indefatigably to operate." Having made this fine speech, she retired for a while with part of her women, and we were told that 'twas to bathe, as the ancients did more commonly than we use nowadays to wash our hands before we eat. The tables were soon placed, the cloth spread, and then the queen sat down. She ate nothing but celestial ambrosia, and drank nothing but divine nectar. As for the lords and ladies that were there, they, as well as we, fared on as rare, costly, and dainty dishes as ever Apicius wot or dreamed of in his life. When we were as round as hoops, and as full as eggs, with stuffing the gut, and alla padrida, some call it an olio. Rabelais potpourri, mot you. was set before us to force hunger to come to terms with us, in case it had not granted us a truce. And such a huge, vast thing it was that the plate which Pythius Altheus gave King Darius would hardly have covered it. The olla consisted of several sorts of pottages, salads, fricassees, saugernies, cabirotados, roast and boiled meat, carbonados, swinging pieces of powdered beef, good old hams, dainty saumates, cakes, tarts, a world of curds after the Moorish way, fresh cheese, jellies, and fruit of all sorts. All this seemed to me good and dainty. However, the sight of it made me sigh, for alas, I could not taste a bit on't. So full I had filled my puddings before, and a bellyful is a bellyful, you know. Yet I must tell you what I saw that seemed to me odd enough, o conscience. 'Twas some pasties in paste, and what should those pasties in paste be, d'ye think, but pasties in pots? At the bottom I perceived store of dice, cards, taros, great cards on which many different things are figured. Mot you, lutes, pieces of ivory to play withal, mot you. Chessmen and checkers, besides full bowls of gold crowns, for those who had a mind to have a game or two and try their chance. Under this I saw a jolly company of mules in stately trappings, with velvet footcloths, and a troop of ambling nags, some for men and some for women. Besides, I don't know how many litters all lined with velvet, and some coaches of Ferrara make. All this for those who had a mind to take the air. This did not seem strange to me, but if anything did, 'twas certainly the queen's way of eating, and truly 'twas very new and very odd. For she chewed nothing, the good lady. Not but that she had good sound teeth, and her meat required to be masticated, but such was her highness's custom. When her pregustators had tasted the meat, her masticators took it and chewed it most nobly. For their dainty chops and gullets were lined through with crimson satin, with little welts and gold pearls, and their teeth were of delicate white ivory. Thus, when they had chewed the meat ready for her highness's maw, they poured it down her throat through a funnel of fine gold, and so on to her craw. For that reason, they told us, she never visited a close stool, but by proxy. Chapter 5.24. How there was a ball in the manner of a tournament, at which Queen Whims was present. After supper there was a ball in the form of a tilt or a tournament, not only worth seeing, but also never to be forgotten. First, the floor of the hall was covered with a large piece of velveted white and yellow checkered tapestry, each checker exactly square, and 3 full spans in breadth. Then 32 young persons came into the hall. 16 of them arrayed in cloth of gold, and of these 8 were young nymphs such as the ancients described Diana's attendants. The other 8 were a king, a queen, 2 wardens of the castle, 2 knights, and 2 archers. Those of the other band were clad in cloth of silver. They posted themselves on the tapestry in the following manner. The kings on the last line on the 4th square, so that the golden king was on a white square, and the silvered king on a yellow square, and each queen by her king, the golden queen on a yellow square, and the silvered queen on a white one. And on each side stood the archers to guide their kings and queens, by the archers the knights, and the wardens by them. In the next row before stood the 8 nymphs, and between the 2 bands of nymphs, 4 rows of squares stood empty. Each band had its musicians, 8 on each side, dressed in its livery, the one with orange-colored damask, the other with white, and all played on different instruments most melodiously and harmoniously, still varying in time and measure as the figure of the dance required. This seemed to me an admirable thing, considering the numerous diversity of steps, backsteps, bounds, rebounds, jerks, paces, leaps, skips, turns, coops, hops, leadings, risings, meetings, flights, ambuscados, moves, and removes. I was also at a loss when I strove to comprehend how the dancers could so suddenly know what every different note meant. For they no sooner heard this or that sound, but they placed themselves in the place which was denoted by the music, though their motions were all different. For the nymphs that stood in the first file, as if they designed to begin the fight, marched straight forwards to their enemies from square to square, unless it were the first step, at which they were free to move over 2 steps at once. They alone never fall back, which is not very natural to other nymphs. And if any of them is so lucky as to advance to the opposite king's row, she is immediately crowned queen of her king, and after that moves with the same state and in the same manner as the queen. But till that happens, they never strike their enemies but forwards, and obliquely in a diagonal line. However, they make it not their chief business to take their foes, for, if they did, they would leave their queen exposed to the adverse parties, who then might take her. The kings move and take their enemies on all sides squareways, and only step from a white square into a yellow one, and vice versa, except at their first step the rank should want other officers than the wardens. For then they can set M in their place, and retire by him. The queens take a greater liberty than any of the rest, for they move backwards and forwards all manner of ways, in a straight line as far as they please, provided the place be not filled with one of her own party, and diagonally also, keeping to the color on which she stands. The archers move backwards or forwards, far and near, never changing the color on which they stand. The knights move and take in a lineal manner, stepping over one square, though a friend or foe stand upon it, posting themselves on the second square to the right or left, from one color to another, which is very unwelcome to the adverse party, and ought to be carefully observed, for they take at unawares. The wardens move and take to the right or left, before or behind them like the kings, and can advance as far as they find places empty, which liberty the kings take not. The law which both sides observe is, at the end of the fight, to besiege and enclose the king of either party, so that he may not be able to move, and being reduced to that extremity, the battle is over, and he loses the day. Now, to avoid this, there is none of either sex of each party, but is willing to sacrifice his or her life, and they begin to take one another on all sides in time, as soon as the music strikes up. When anyone takes a prisoner, he makes his honors, and striking him gently in the hand, puts him out of the field in combat, and encamps where he stood. If one of the kings chanced to stand where he might be taken, it is not lawful for any of his adversaries that had discovered him to lay hold on him. Far from it, they are strictly enjoined humbly to pay him their respects, and give him notice, saying, God preserve you, sir. That his officers may relieve and cover him, or he may remove, if unhappily he could not be relieved. However, he is not to be taken, but greeted with a good morrow, the others bending the knee, and thus the tournament uses to end. Chapter 5.25. How the 32 persons at the ball fought. The two companies having taken their stations, the music struck up, and with a martial sound, which had something of horrid in it, like a point of war, roused and alarmed both parties, who now began to shiver, and then soon were warmed with warlike rage. And having got in readiness to fight desperately, impatient of delay stood waiting for the charge. Then the music of the silvered band ceased playing, and the instruments of the golden side alone were heard, which denoted that the golden party attacked. Accordingly, a new movement was played for the onset, and we saw the nymph who stood before the queen turn to the left towards her king, as it were to ask leave to fight. And thus saluting her company at the same time, she moved 2 squares forwards, and saluted the adverse party. Now the music of the golden brigade ceased playing, and their antagonists began again. I ought to have told you that the nymph who began by saluting her company had by that formality also given them to understand that they were to fall on. She was saluted by them in the same manner, with a full turn to the left, except the queen, who went aside towards her king to the right, and the same manner of salutation was observed on both sides during the whole ball. The silvered nymph that stood before her queen likewise moved as soon as the music of her party sounded a charge. Her salutations, and those of her side, were to the right, and her queen to the left. She moved in the second square forwards, and saluted her antagonists, facing the first golden nymph, so that there was not any distance between them, and you would have thought they too had been going to fight, but they only strike sideways. Their comrades, whether silvered or golden, followed M in an intercalary figure, and seemed to skirmish a while, till the golden nymph who had first entered the lists, striking a silvered nymph in the hand on the right, put her out of the field and set herself in her place. But soon the music playing a new measure, she was struck by a silvered archer, who after that was obliged himself to retire. A silvered knight then sallied out, and the golden queen posted herself before her king. Then the silvered king, dreading the golden queen's fury, removed to the right, to the place where his warden stood, which seemed to him strong and well guarded. The 2 knights on the left, whether golden or silvered, marched up, and on either side took up many nymphs who could not retreat. Principally the golden knight, who made this his whole business. But the silvered knight had greater designs, dissembling all along, and even sometimes not taking a nymph when he could have done it, still moving on till he was come up to the main body of the enemies in such a manner that he saluted their king with a "God save you, sir." The whole golden brigade quaked for fear and anger, those words giving notice of their king's danger. Not but that they could soon relieve him, but because their king being thus saluted, they were to lose their warden on the right wing without any hopes of a recovery. Then the golden king retired to the left, and the silvered knight took the golden warden, which was a mighty loss to that party. However, they resolved to be revenged, and surrounded the knight that he might not escape. He tried to get off, behaving himself with a great deal of gallantry, and his friends did what they could to save him. But at last he fell into the golden queen's hands and was carried off. Her forces, not yet satisfied, having lost one of her best men, with more fury than conduct moved about, and did much mischief among their enemies. The silvered party warily dissembled, watching their opportunity to be even with them, and presented one of their nymphs to the golden queen, having laid an ambuscado. So that the nymph being taken, a golden archer had like to have seized the silvered queen. Then the golden knight undertakes to take the silvered king and queen, and says, "Good morrow." Then the silvered archer salutes them, and was taken by a golden nymph, and she herself by a silvered one. The fight was obstinate and sharp. The wardens left their posts, and advanced to relieve their friends. The battle was doubtful, and victory hovered over both armies. Now the silvered host charge and break through their enemies' ranks as far as the golden king's tent, and now they are beaten back. The golden queen distinguishes herself from the rest by her mighty achievements still more than by her garb and dignity. For at once she takes an archer, and, going sideways, seizes a silvered warden. Which thing the silvered queen perceiving, she came forwards, and, rushing on with equal bravery, takes the last golden warden and some nymphs. The two queens fought a long while hand to hand, now striving to take each other by surprise, then to save themselves, and sometimes to guard their kings. Finally, the golden queen took the silvered queen, but presently after she herself was taken by the silvered archer. Then the silvered king had only 3 nymphs, an archer, and a warden left, and the golden only 3 nymphs and the right knight, which made them fight more slowly and warily than before. The 2 kings seemed to mourn for the loss of their loving queens, and only studied and endeavored to get new ones out of all their nymphs to be raised to that dignity, and thus be married to them. This made them excite those brave nymphs to strive to reach the farthest rank, where stood the king of the contrary party, promising them certainly to have them crowned if they could do this. The golden nymphs were beforehand with the others, and out of their number was created a queen who was dressed in royal robes and had a crown set on her head. You need not doubt the silvered nymphs made also what haste they could to be queens. One of them was within a step of the coronation place, but there the golden knight lay ready to intercept her, so that she could go no further. The new golden queen, resolved to show herself valiant and worthy of her advancement to the crown, achieved great feats of arms. But in the meantime, the silvered knight takes the golden warden who guarded the camp, and thus there was a new silvered queen, who, like the other, strove to excel in heroic deeds at the beginning of her reign. Thus the fight grew hotter than before. 1,000 stratagems, charges, rallyings, retreats, and attacks were tried on both sides, till at last the silvered queen, having by stealth advanced as far as the golden king's tent, cried, "God save you, sir." Now none but his new queen could relieve him, so she bravely came and exposed herself to the utmost extremity to deliver him out of it. Then the silvered warden with his queen reduced the golden king to such a stress that, to save himself, he was forced to lose his queen, but the golden king took him at last. However, the rest of the golden party were soon taken, and that king being left alone, the silvered party made him a low bow, crying, "Good morrow, sir," which denoted that the silvered king had got the day. This being heard, the music of both parties loudly proclaimed the victory. And thus the first battle ended to the unspeakable joy of all the spectators. After this, the 2 brigades took their former stations and began to tilt a second time, much as they had done before. Only the music played somewhat faster than at the first battle, and the motions were altogether different. I saw the Golden Queen sally out one of the first, with an archer and a knight, as it were angry at the former defeat, and she had like to have fallen upon the silvered king in his tent among his officers. But having been balked in her attempt, she skirmished briskly, and overthrew so many silvered nymphs and officers that it was a most amazing sight. You would have sworn she had been another Penthesilea, for she behaved herself with as much bravery as that Amazonian queen did at Troy. But this havoc did not last long, for the silvered party, exasperated by their loss, resolved to perish or stop her progress, and having posted an archer in ambuscado on a distant angle, together with a knight-errant, her highness fell into their hands and was carried out of the field. The rest were soon routed after the taking of their queen, who, without doubt, from that time resolved to be more wary and keep near her king, without venturing so far amidst her enemies and less with more force to defend her. Thus the silvered brigade once more got the victory. This did not dishearten or deject the golden party, far from it. They soon appeared again in the field to face their enemies, and being posted as before, both the armies seemed more resolute and cheerful than ever. Now the martial concert began, and the music was above a hemiole the quicker, according to the warlike Phrygian mode, such as was invented by Marsyas. Then our combatants began to wheel about, and charge with such a swiftness that in an instant they made 4 moves, besides the usual salutations. So that they were continually in action, flying, hovering, jumping, vaulting, curveting, with pectoristical turns and motions, and often intermingled. Seeing them then turn about on one foot after they had made their honors, we compared them to your tops or gigs, such as boys use to whip about, making them turn round so swiftly that they sleep, as they call it, and motion cannot be perceived, but resembles rest its contrary. So that if you make a point or mark on some part of one of those gigs, 'twill be perceived not as a point, but a continual line in a most divine manner, as Cusenus has wisely observed. While they were thus warmly engaged, we heard continually the claps and episemapses which those of the 2 bands reiterated at the taking of their enemies. And this, joined to the variety of their motions and music, would have forced smiles out of the most severe Cato, the never-laughing Crassus, the Athenian man-hater Timon, nay, even whining Heraclitus, though he abhorred laughing, the action that is most peculiar to man. For who could have forborne? Seeing those young warriors with their nymphs and queens so briskly and gracefully advance, retire, jump, leap, skip, spring, fly, vault, caper, move to the right, to the left, every way still in time, so swiftly, and yet so dexterously that they never touched one another but methodically. As the number of the combatants lessened, the pleasure of the spectators increased, for the stratagems and motions of the remaining forces were more singular. I shall only add that this pleasing entertainment charmed us to such a degree that our minds were ravished with admiration and delight, and the martial harmony moved our souls so powerfully that we easily believed what is said of Ismenias's having excited Alexander to rise from table and run to his arms, with such a warlike melody. At last the Golden King remained master of the field, and while we were minding those dances, Queen Whims vanished, so that we saw her no more from that day to this. Then Geber's Michelots conducted us, and we were set down among her abstractors, as her queenship had commanded. After that we returned to the port of Matotechne, and thence straight aboard our ships. For the wind was fair, and had we not hoisted out of hand, we could hardly have got off in 3/4 of a moon in the wane. Chapter 5.26. How we came to the island of Odes, where the ways go up and down. We sailed before the wind, between a pair of courses, and in 2 days made the island of Odes, at which place we saw a very strange thing. The ways there are animals, so true is Aristotle's saying that all self-moving things are animals. Now the ways walk there. Ergo, they are then animals. Some of them are strange unknown ways, like those of the planets. Others are highways, crossways, and byways. I perceived that the travelers and inhabitants of that country asked, "Whither does this way go? Whither does that way go?" Some answered between Mighty and Fevrils to the parish church, to the city, to the river, and so forth. Being thus in their right way, they used to reach their journey's end without any further trouble, just like those who go by water from Lyon to Avignon or Arles. Now, as you know that nothing is perfect here below, We heard there was a sort of people whom they called highwaymen, waybeaters, and makers of inroads in roads, and that the poor ways were sadly afraid of them, and shunned them as you do robbers. For these used to waylay them, as people lay trains for wolves and set gins for woodcocks. I saw one who was taken up with a Lord Chief Justice's warrant for having unjustly, and in spite of palace, taken the schoolway, which is the longest. Another boasted that he had fairly taken his shortest, and that doing so, he first compassed his design. Thus, Carpelin, meeting once Epistomen looking upon a wall with his fiddle-diddle, or live-urinal, in his hand, to make a little maid's water, cried that he did not wonder now how the other came to be still the first at Pantagruel's levee, since he held his shortest and least used. I found Borg's highway among these. It went with the deliberation of an abbot, but was made to scamper at the approach of some wagoners, who threatened to have it trampled under their horses' feet, and make their wagons run over it, as Tullia's chariot did over her father's body. I also espied there the old way between Peron and St. Quentin, which seemed to me a very good, honest, plain way, as smooth as a carpet, and as good as ever was trod upon by shoe of leather. Among the rocks I knew again the good old way to La Ferrer, mounted on a huge bear. This at a distance would have put me in mind of St. Jerome's picture, had but the bear been a lion, for the poor way was all mortified, and wore a long hoary beard uncombed and entangled, which looked like the picture of winter, or at least like a white frosted bush. On that way were store of beads or rosaries, coarsely made of wild pine tree, and it seemed kneeling, not standing, nor lying flat, but its sides and middle were beaten with huge stones, insomuch that it proved to us at once an object of fear and pity. While we were examining it, a runner, bachelor of the place, took us aside, and showing us a white smooth way, somewhat filled with straw, said, "Henceforth, gentlemen, do not reject the opinion of Thales the Milesian, who said that water is the beginning of all things, nor that of Homer, who tells us that all things derive their original from the ocean. For this same way which you see here had its beginning from water, and is to return whence she came before 2 months come to an end. Now carts are driven here, where boats used to be rowed." "Truly," said Pantagruel, "you tell us no news. We see 500 such changes, and more, every year in our world." Then reflecting on the different manner of going of those moving ways, he told us he believed that Philolaus and Aristarchus had philosophized in this island, and that Seleucus, Motteux reads that some, indeed, were of opinion. Indeed, was of opinion the earth turns round about its poles, and not the heavens, whatever we may think to the contrary, as when we are on the river Loire we think the trees and the shore moves, though this is only an effect of our boat's motion. As we went back to our ships, we saw 3 waylayers, who, having been taken in ambuscado, were going to be broken on the wheel, and a huge fornicator was burned with a lingering fire for beating a way and breaking one of its sides. We were told it was the way of the banks of the Nile in Egypt.